Welcome to our special edition on AnewZ. My name is Anastasia Lavrina, and today here with me I have a very distinguished guest. Joining me now is Mr. Mohamed AnewZ, Chairman of the AnewZ Foundation. Warm welcome to our program.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for us. So 3 days, 12 Global Baku Forum, unique platform where the former leaders or the acting policymakers come together to discuss the challenges and opportunities. And the topic of this conference was how to turn the challenges to the opportunities. I would like to talk with you about the situation in the Middle East, quite fragile region. How do you think the global leaders and the regional powers also can use the challenges they're facing today and to turn them to opportunities?
So thank you very much. It's a very timely question that you ask. Before October 7th, the then Secretary of National Security head in the US, Jake Sullivan, said that he sees the Israel-Palestine border and the Israel-Palestine issue as one of the quietest now, and not much is required to be done in the Middle East. This was roughly a week before October 7th happened. And the US at that time and most of Europe were trying to focus their efforts on either containing or confronting China. October 7th was a massive wake-up call for the United States and for Israel and for the rest of the Middle East as well. I personally feel that October 7th has put back the question of statehood for Palestine significantly. Now, that is the challenge. How do we turn that into an opportunity? Secondly, in the course of the aftermath of October 7th, Israel took steps to degrade a number of the militias that were operating fully and without accountability and responsibility in the Middle East, like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. So these organizations have largely been degraded, and that in itself then allowed for that challenge to be converted into an opportunity in which you now see for the very first time after decades some sense of stability coming into Lebanon and Syria. In Syria, the Turkish government played a significant part in helping the overthrow of the brutal Assad regime and its replacement by, hopefully, still very early days, but hopefully a government that is going to be inclusive and will ensure that all Syrians are allowed to participate freely in the development of their country. Lebanon, the same. So I think that there are many situations here already that we have seen where challenges have been taken and made into opportunities, hopefully for a better place. There are two elephants in the room, though, that we need to fix. One of them is a lasting resolution to the Israel-Palestine conflict, which has, I think, confronted all of us for the last 75 years. And secondly, Iran. Iran cannot be ignored. It's too big to fail. It's 80 million people, a highly educated workforce, and on the threshold of becoming a nuclear power. And if they are not invited to sit on any discussion table, then I'm afraid that we will not have the stability that the Middle East craves. Middle East people want to be safe, they want to be stable, they want to be prosperous, they want to be happy.
Yeah, Mr. AnewZ, that's indeed very interesting, but we have to discuss another challenge and how to turn it into opportunity. The global powers, the superpowers, they do have different approach to the situations in different parts of the world. It doesn't matter the situation in the South Caucasus, in East Europe, in between Russia and Ukraine, or the Middle East, let's say. Donald Trump came up with a special plan on the future of Gaza restoration, and the Arab states has its own approach on the futures of the region. Therefore, how do you think we can use this challenge and to make it opportunity?
So there are three ways in which you can exercise leverage in order to achieve outcomes. The first way is military, the second way is moral leverage, and the third is political leverage. And different countries have the power to be able to use one or more of these leverages. Historically, the United States has relied on military leverage. You may or may not know, but worldwide, the United States has 750 plus bases, Middle East military bases all over the world, including the Middle East. The sum total of military bases of Russia, China, EU and UK, and this will surprise you, total 46. So you can compare where the real military power lies, and you can then see from that why the Trump administration is a firm believer in might is right. It's our way or the highway. We are first and we are alone, and either you are with us or you are against us. Now, that approach may have worked successfully maybe a few decades back, but today you have a situation where there are middle-ranking powers, where there are emerging powers who are increasingly asserting their sovereignty, their independence of thinking, and they're not just going to blindly follow diktats from wherever. So when you look at the plans, you look at the US plan, that was a very drastic one because it called for the complete displacement of the people of Palestine from Gaza, and that the plan was that either Egypt should take them or they should house them in the Sinai.
Or Jordan, if I'm not mistaken.
And the West Bank Palestinians have to get into Jordan. In essence, what that means is something I wrote about a year ago in one of my articles, that this is a zero-state outcome for Palestine. Against this, there is now a plan that Egypt proposed, but that plan has two deficiencies or three deficiencies. One is it is solely a reconstruction of Gaza plan. It is not a plan for the resolution of the Israel-Palestine conflict. The second deficiency with that is that when you think of it, the Arab states did not precipitate the crisis in Hamas and Gaza on October 7th. That was precipitated by Palestinians, and then it received an overwhelming response by Israel, relying on arms supplied by the United States and Western powers. So why are the US and Western powers not on this table to say this is our contribution to help rebuild Gaza, when it was their arms that led to the destruction? Why is it that so much attention is being paid to Ukraine and how to help Ukraine rebuild by the West, but not as much or no attention is being paid to Gaza? These double standards are now being perceived by the rest of the world, and they don't like what they see. And the third deficiency is, whatever you may think of October 7, the Palestinians in Gaza still have deep respect for Hamas and for the fact that this October 7th was not something that happened in isolation. It happened as a response to the way in which the Israeli regime treated the Palestinians in Gaza. So there is even more support for Hamas than there would have been. And to say in this Gaza plan that there is no role for Hamas in it, I think defeats the purpose. So we have two extreme plans, neither of them are actually workable.
Yes, and the lives of the people are still on the agenda. The same is happening in the situation around Ukraine, when one side, let's say United Kingdom and France, are pushing for more military support for Ukraine, and Donald Trump is trying to get a direct talk with Vladimir Putin, the president of Russian Federation, to come up to any kind of ceasefire agreement. But apart from those things, we do have a good example when the government used the challenges for its own benefits and the benefits of the region. And now I'm talking about our region, the South Caucasus, the situation between Armenia and Azerbaijan. As Mr. President Ilham Aliyev mentioned in his interview to Euronews, he said that the peace will be possible only after the signing of the final peace agreement between two governments. And it's quite interesting situation what we see today, that two sides finally agreed the draft agreement, the draft text of that agreement, and hopefully it will be signed in the near future. So it seems that Baku used the challenges it's faced almost 30 years and turn it to opportunities for the region we can see now.
So I think that's a very interesting example and an analogy. So if you insert parallels between Azerbaijan, Armenia on the one side and Israel, Palestine on the other, there are lessons to learn. So the reason why today Azerbaijan was able to get to the stage where they can at least contemplate signing an overall peace agreement was firstly that they had a military advantage for the first time that enabled them to step in and to take Nagorno-Karabakh. This is Azeri territory. For 40 years Azerbaijan was trying to get it back, and finally with the help of Turkey and the armed forces of Azerbaijan it was able to succeed. The second stage in this process was a ceasefire, and the third stage in the process is a full and hopefully comprehensive, lasting peace deal. So I would say that Israel here, which is the superior military power, has to understand that it's much better to negotiate from a position of strength rather than from a position of weakness. And when you are in a strong position, you need to take the moral high ground. You need to be statesmen like President Aliyev has done here and say, look, we defeated you, we got what we wanted, but now we are happy to sit down, discuss a ceasefire, and finally make peace with you. The question is, will the Israeli leadership have the same courage, the same approach, the same vision, the same maturity that President Aliyev had in reaching this stage? I don't know today. And of course, it requires a counterpart that is also willing now to sit around a table and say, fine, we understand that this is now the end game, and we also want to make peace for our people. But there is one fly in the ointment on the Armenian situation, which I understand that they are still very busy lobbying EU as hard as they can to try to act as spoilers in this and to try to get whatever leverage or advantage that they can get. So yes, we are there, we are very nearly there, but not 100% there. And then of course, even when you have an agreement, the question is, will the parties finally abide by the terms of their agreement, or will party breach it? And this is also extremely relevant for whatever happens in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, because what Putin wants is a peace deal. He wants Ukraine to be neutral. He wants Ukraine's armed forces to be downsized, and he wants to be able to keep whatever territory Russia has today in the east and the south as a buffer for any future. And there is no prospect of NATO membership for Ukraine. What again the West is missing here is that they are focused, and today, right now, as we speak, my Prime Minister in the UK, Keir Starmer, is holding a conference to try to get, as he says, a coalition of willing to support a ceasefire. But what's a ceasefire? A ceasefire is a 30-day pause, and likely it will benefit Russia far more because it will allow Russia to regroup their armed forces, and when the ceasefire is over 30 days later, then they are able to strike with more impunity should they wish to do that. So I think that this is just, you have a wound on your body and you just put some sticky plaster to stop the blood from flowing, but it doesn't stop the underlying cause from being solved. So I think that an overall solution is what we should really be all focused on Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine. What we are doing at the moment is meddling in conflicts, managing conflicts, but not resolving conflicts.
Right. I totally agree with what you're saying about the ceasefire agreement. We had so-called ceasefire agreement with Armenia in 1994, sure, but it was violated many times by Armenian side, and finally we saw what we saw, the
sure,
Second Karabakh War in 2020. Therefore, we know in Azerbaijan what it means, and any ceasefire is quite fragile and can be stopped in any way. But I would like to have a short remark to what you said. The difference in between the situation in our region, Russia and Ukraine, and the situation in the Middle East, is that since 2020 there were so many countries who wanted to be involved in the negotiation process, like United States of America, Belgium, the Brussels itself, European Union, and Moscow, Russian Federation. And Armenia and Azerbaijan could solve the last questions they had only through the direct negotiation.
This is so important.
Yes, in the case with Russia and Ukraine, in the case with the Middle East, there are so many countries who want to be involved, and all of them, each of them has its own interests. And it negatively affects the negotiation process.
Sure.
That's a big problem also, it's big challenges, and now it's time to think also how to turn that part into opportunities. And my last question,
But let me just make one, if we have time, please. I would like to respond to that.
Please.
I think that is a very, very powerful observation, that at the end of the day, ultimate peace can only come when two fighting parties are going to be able to talk to themselves, sit around a table, agree something, and finally, if it is possible, give each other a hug and leave the room. Any other party intermediate, I think the intermediation is good to facilitate for two parties to come together, but then they should be left alone to resolve this. Now, is it ever possible for Israel and Palestine to sit around a table to resolve this?
Israel will not sit with Hamas.
Israel will not negotiate. And it's a Palestinian problem also, because Palestine does not have a leader. It has two fragmented groups, Hamas on one side and the Palestinian Authority on the other side. There has been no elections in Palestine for a decade now. So what mandate can anyone have to be able to say, talk on behalf of the Palestinian people? So Palestine has to put its house in order first, elect a leader that represents both sides, and then you have a negotiating partner with Israel. I'm involved in the Iran-United States dialogue, and for the very first time there is the possibility, 40 years has not happened, for a direct meeting between President Trump and the Iranian leadership. Not the supreme leader, but the president of Iran, accompanied by one or two people. It has not happened in 40 years. I hope that both countries seize that chance, meet face to face, because it's only, you cannot have the Europeans intervening on your behalf, or Saudi Arabia, or Russia, or Oman, or Qatar, because as you said rightly, each of these people have their own axe to grind, they have their own agenda, they have something, a quid pro quo that they want in return, and for them the Iran issue is a side issue. For Iran, it is a main issue. So we have to work very hard now that the die is cast, to push both parties to bury the hatchet. No maximum pressure, 30-day suspension of maximum pressure by the US. US cannot expect people to come and talk to them with a gun held to their head. It doesn't work. That's not how diplomacy works. Take the pressure off, no maximum pressure for 30 days, and allow for the parties to meet somewhere in Washington, and then you will see the possibilities that people will want to make up rather than continue fighting.
Right, and the leader of the country, the president of the country, knows better what is good for the people, for the population.
Sure.
It's not about someone who is located far away geographically to decide on the future of your population.
Sure.
Again, coming back to our region, we can see that Azerbaijan is trying to promote peace development, peace promotion in the region, not only through the finalized peace agreement, but bringing together the economic prosperity, which will definitely benefit Armenia, Azerbaijan, the region itself, including Iran, the Central Asia. Now I'm talking about the Middle Corridor, for example, which will connect China, Central Asia, South Caucasus, and European Union. It's also the same about the energy development, green energy transition, and etc. I know that you also have a great experience and knowledge on the issues related to the Central Asia. And I guess this region is taking more and more attention. France, United Kingdom are trying to have more connections with the region itself, understanding its geographical and geopolitical importance. So how do you see the future development of these parts of the world, especially in decision-making process?
So I really like the approach and the policies adopted by President Aliyev. Firstly, I was absolutely struck during his address to the Global Baku Forum. His fluency in English, his expression of thoughts and ideas, his articulation of very, very difficult problems without notes was absolutely amazing to see. I've never seen a leader from this part of the world be able to explain in such simple language the challenges that are being faced and the opportunities that lie forward. So full marks to this. Secondly, Azerbaijan is blessed with natural resources. It's rich in oil and gas, but it's also a country that has now seen that the power that this gives it, which is that unless your neighbors are also happy and stable, you are yourself not happy and stable, however much money you can have. So you need to have an approach of investing in your neighbors to ensure their own stability. And this is what struck me very much by President Aliyev's comments, that they are open and ready to invest in their neighbors, to make sure that prosperity is shared and not just kept for the Azeri people. So I think this requires a lot of maturity and was very, very good to see. So I think this is a role model. And then how do you navigate being neutral? So if you look at Azerbaijan, it has good relations with Russia, good relations with Kazakhstan, good relations with the Middle East largely, good relations, neighborly relations with Iran. They're not ideal, but they are still, they don't lead to any conflagration at all. Good relations with the West, with Israel. So they have matured into making sure that they are neutral and they maintain good ties with anyone. The ties are based firstly on what is Azerbaijan's national interest first and foremost, and then ensuring that they treat everybody around them on an equal footing, transactional where it's necessary. So I think it's a very, very mature approach.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining our talk today. It was indeed a pleasure to learn more about your experience and your attitude to the global changes we see today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, and thank you for having me. Thank you.